I have two aspects to my role. First part is gloriously called a principal advisor to DFID, FCO and DIT, which basically means a very grand way of saying that I act as a bridge between some of the fantastic capacity and capability that the Met Office has and the requirements of those departments, both in a policy sense but also an operational sense. So I have a sort of bridging aspect to my role. And then the other side is where I head up our International Development Department. And in heading up our International Development Department, we work very closely with DFID as we fund manage the WISER program, Information Services program in Africa, delivering a transformational change in the usability and uptake of weather and climate services for African households in particular, and the Asia Regional Resilience to a Changing Climate program, which is focusing very much on similar aspects, but focusing on the South Asia region. Part of the reason why we've been asked to talk is because of our role in those programs, but also as weather and climate knows no boundaries, and Met Office has been working with other nations across the whole chain of weather and climate for many, many years. So it's not something that we've been doing more recently. For over 50 years now, we've been supporting African national meteorological and hydrological services through the World Meteorological Organization's Voluntary Cooperation Program, and that's small technical assistance projects that really are making quite a difference to the way that information can be provided and used by people. In the last 10 years, we've seen quite a shift in the way that the information has been taken from producers of weather and climate data, so institutions like the Met Office, and the users of those services. So I just wanted to share with you a few of our sort of impact stories. So this is after we'd finished the first phase of the WISER program. We went back out to some of the projects and we asked them why the work that we were doing in WISER had delivered impact. So what had that work done? So because this is sort of very much focused at the user end, and user is a very important term that quite often gets used a lot, but what does it actually mean? It means those people who are taking the information from the producers and taking decisions are doing something with that information. So we went back out and asked of each of our projects, what difference has it made by doing this project with us? So if I take a couple of these sound bites, and you can read them all here on your screen. So in the WISER Western programme, we were looking at improving, as Kenya decentralised its way that it produced weather information and farmers could access it. We trained a lot of county Met directors in how to work with their farming communities to understand what information they needed and on what timescales. And one of the big impacts here is that over 100,000 farmers across Kenya are using those forecasts. They've reached the farmers who need them to take decisions on when to sow, when to harvest. Alongside that, that led to an agricultural production increase of up to 20%. So this is, a huge increase just from a small change in how we do things. If I move across to the right, you'll notice there's a quite big increase in sort of the Scipio program. So Scipio was focusing very much on seasonal information and thinking about what information could be told from those sort of longer term, more uncertain forecasts, and how can we use the information that can be quite vague, can be a little bit hard to interpret if you're somebody who's having to take a decision about what to do with either water or to energy supply, and to take that information and to work with the producers of those information and users of the information to think about what decisions they were taking and how they were going to use the information. And some of the sound bites we received back is that KenGen can now make decisions in good time. We've seen a 400% increase in crop yields. So it feels like the sort of thing that we're doing is good. It feels like we're making a difference in the projects that we're delivering. And how we've done that, we've used something called a co-production. We've developed a co-production methodology. And what that basically means is getting users and producers of information together at a very early stage to start to understand the limitations, the current capabilities and production around us of the science. So what can you actually do with what information exists and what decisions need to be taken? So pulling those two groups together to co-develop services, to understand and to monitor and to deliver and evaluate the way that we actually produce all of our services. So there's a continuous monitoring, knowledge exchange and learning process that is underpinning each of the products and services that we're designing. This isn't something that we're just doing internationally. We do this domestically as well. So it's very much a way of looking at how do we ensure that this as we've talked about, the science is pretty clear, the climate is changing. We need to be thinking about what decisions we take now that will ensure resilience of people in the future. And this is one of the methodologies that we have developed under the WISER program that helps sort of processize some of those discussions taking place. We can ensure that the services we produce are the best they can be. The Met Office has sort of taken us a next step and has taken us across into the ARC program, but also, as I said, the work that we do domestically as well. It's a people-led services approach. That's what we're doing all of this for, is to make sure that the people that are most impacted by current shocks, weather and potential variability are better able to cope with those impacts over the course of a changing kind of climate. So we need to go through a sort of process of understanding how to work with people to design services, to understand what questions still remain of the science, to bring all of that to bear. I was also asked to talk about a little bit about some of the work that we did over the summer under the Climate Summit, where we designed something along very similar sort of lines, where we're looking at the Risk-Informed Early Action Partnership. And this was under the Adaptation and Resilience theme at the Climate Summit. We were looking at how we could get ahead of the hazard. So how can we better link early action and early warning to ensure that more people are safer from disasters? So we created a new partnership called REAP with a goal of making 1 billion people safer from disasters. At the point that it launched in September, we had 33 partners, 15 nations, 18 different organisations who were keen to see that the various mechanisms were put in place to allow people to be made safer from disasters. And these are predominantly natural disasters, clearly, because that's where the early warning systems in particular come into effect. It has some quite ambitious targets by 2025 to ensure that 50 countries have reviewed and integrated their disaster risk management and climate adaptation laws, to make sure that 1 billion people are covered by the financing and delivery mechanisms connected to early action plans, ensuring that they can act ahead of predicted disasters and crises, that there's investment in some of those underpinning infrastructure, so 500 million invested in early warning systems, but they need to build on existing programs such as WISER and ARC and initiatives such as CRUISE to ensure that those systems actually effect change, and ultimately that 1 billion people are covered by better warning systems. I was asked to remind you that Saskia in your CED department is the DFID lead for this particular initiative, John Stone as head of Secretariat, and obviously myself as one of the co-authors. So just, I guess, in terms of sort of summing up, the reason I was asked to talk about those two things, we are committed to a certain amount of climate change now, and people are already struggling to cope with variability. The frequencies of shocks we're seeing are increasing, things like Idai and Kenneth, as we saw earlier in 2019, and things like the locust response. So what we're really seeing is a sort of a call to develop programs and development activities that are really focused in on some of those communities and people that are most at risk, and thinking about what it is that we need to see in this next iteration of programs, WISER 3 and various other development activities that are undertaken to ensure that we are building a more resilient future for the people that are most at risk.